Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon and welcome to the Post 106, the PhD admissions interview. Amazing request from Nick. Hi Nick. Nick is a new member of our community, a new member of our family and a new mate of mine. Nick, you rule. And Nick asked for this particular post because he's been invited for a PhD admissions interview. Ooh, and he wants to know what they are, what to expect, and how to structure it. So I'm thrilled to do that. And isn't it amazing? After 460 plus videos that we've done over nearly 10 years, we've never done this one. And the recent requests are just amazing. So thank you for your innovation. Thank you for keeping me on my toes. And Nick, this one's for you. Let's do this. And what we're going to be doing is constructing a methodology to go into these interviews, these sessions. They may be formal, they may be informal. I would argue the methodology is the same. So what is happening here, I think, is we're trying to help students work out if this is the supervisor advisor, this is the university, this is the project, this is the time. So we're just trying to work out if a match is in place. But I want to also extend it just a little bit beyond just the student, our prospective student in this experience. I want to also look at what a supervisor advisor is looking for in these sessions as well. We've got a lot of colleagues, very senior colleagues and early career researchers as part of our community. And I just wanted to make sure you were aware what early career researchers, what advisors need to be looking for as well. So in each of these three sections, the methodology I'm going to construct, I want to talk about the student perspective and the academics perspective. Now, I absolutely recommend a screening gig like this. I recommend it for everybody. You should do this and you should take notes and you should send an email after the meeting confirming those notes so everybody agrees what happened in this session. Because you are about to make a decision about 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, and let's hope it stops there, years of your life. You're about to, suffer. You're about to go through some very bad stuff, and you're about to put your family and your friends through some really bad stuff. So we can't get lost in flattery or hype or spin here. This has got to be an honest and robust conversation. It's also important that we are transparent here. So that's why I'm configuring a methodology that is repeatable and we all know what is going on. And the reason this matters so much is that the attrition rate in doctoral programs is so high. Lovett's great book, Leaving the Ivory Tower, confirmed that attrition rates are running at 50%. So 50% of the people that start don't finish, they leave the program. Now that does vary by nation, by university, and also by discipline. But I want you aware going into this conversation, whether you are a student or a prospective supervisor, and what we're assessing here, colleagues, and I'll give it a label, I'll give it a name, is what we're assessing is if there is a deficit model of supervision in place. Let me explain what that means. The deficit model of supervision, can I say it's also a deficit model of teaching and learning, refers to a student being configured as in deficit, so a Padawan. That is, they are incomplete and they must be brought to knowledge by an experienced scholar. Okay. Now, what that type of modelling does is it ignores the life experience, the expertise of the student themselves. It applies homology. It assumes that as the supervisor was taught, so you will be taught. So that's not good. You are a whole and complete person before you come to a PhD. So monitor that particular ideology. What you're looking for is called an abundance model of supervision, an abundance model of teaching and learning. That is, the student is already full. The student is wise. The student is a complete human. So the student is arriving into a program already complete, already whole, and they're enrolling in a doctorate for many reasons, and they need to speak those reasons. It may be for professional development, it may be for promotion, that's particularly the case in prof docs, but it may be of interest. There's a very large section of doctorates these days called, and I'm a bit ambivalent about the phrase, but let's use it, a lifestyle doctorate. So people enrolling in a PhD out of areas of interest. But also, can I say, people moving into a second career, a second doctorate, people who are wanting support to write a book, write a monograph, enroll in a PhD. There's so many reasons that you enroll in a PhD as human beings that do enroll. And all of those reasons are incredibly valuable. All of them, all of them. And the thing to remember at this point is the student's imperative or motivation to enter the program will be very different from what the supervisor's imperative or motivation was to enroll in their own PhD program. Different motivations, okay? So that's a difference of personal and professional experience, and it is important to acknowledge it. It is important to speak the words. The key reason, I would argue, for the failure of PhD student supervisor advisor relationships is that the student's assumptions and the supervisor's assumptions are never shared. There it is. So both parties are sort of walking through supervision, both thinking that they agree about the number of meetings, how we communicate, authorship and so forth. All these assumptions bubble, and when suddenly there's this shocking realization that two different people think very differently, attrition can emerge. So therefore this interview is great, but it must be honest, because what you're actually doing is seeing if these two human beings can work together during difficult times. That's what we're doing here. And we are looking for that abundance model of teaching and learning and supervision in this interview. And I'll tell you why it is so important, why, you hear me talk about it all the time. Let me explain. And the reason is, yes, there's that dreadful attrition rate. Let me tell you about that attrition rate and make it even more horrific, okay? Particular groups are more likely to attrit from a PhD. Who are those groups? Indigenous students, students of colour, women, older students, students with an impairment or a disability. They are more likely to attrit. So the group that are most likely to finish in most nations are young men in the experimental sciences. They finish at a higher level and they finish faster. And there are reasons for that. But most people enrolling in a PhD are not young men in the experimental sciences. So what happens? And can I say this attrition rate has nothing to do with intelligence. It has been studied. The students that attrit and the students that complete both are of equal intellectual ability. Okay, so it's not that you're not smart enough. It's not that you're not intelligent. No. You are equal in intelligence, so you are attriting, you are leaving the program for different reasons. Therefore, as your old mate always says, begin with the end in mind. I want you to know these facts about doctoral education. Go into this interview with these facts. Understand the deficit model of teaching and learning. Understand the abundance model of teaching and learning. Know about those attrition rates. Understand them. Now, from this foundation, let's go into the interview itself with our methodology. Let's do this. Now, there are three parts, I would argue, that are the components of this preliminary interview to see whether or not you want to enter this PhD program. And I call them PPR. Person, project, relationship. I'll say that again. Person, project, relationship. That's the methodology. And let's start with person. As a supervisor, I am coming into that interview to understand the student's motivation. So who they are and why they are doing a PhD right now. What are the goals here? So what I'm trying to understand is why at this moment of their life they're enrolling in a PhD. So I need to understand where they are now And I would like them to speak the words about where they would like to be at the end of the PhD. Now, I also need to read work from the student. I like to see a CV, but I also want to get a taste of their writing, of their research skills, right? So this is quite important. Very happy if it had been undergraduate paper. I'm just really not bothered. And so what I'm looking for is, can the student write? Can the student reference? Has the student got information literacy in place? And can I say, issues or problems in these areas, they're not deal breakers at all, but I need to know what I'm going into and what diagnostic packages of care may be required on the way through. Now, for the student, you must do a huge amount of unobtrusive research on your prospective supervisor. Now, this is very easy to do these days. You have never had more information about another human being, particularly an academic, than you do right now. So go to Google Scholar, and what are you looking for? Let's do this. You're checking if the person is research active. Now, the baseline definition, and wow, this is a baseline, the baseline definition is 5 publications in 5 years. So 1 a year is basically the definition of research active. Should be much higher, but I lost that debate years ago. But I also want you to look at the shape of the Google Scholar, check the sustainability of their career. So in other words, do they have sort of 5 years where there's nothing and then a spurt? And all of that's fine and understandable, particularly if you're thinking about mat leave and all those sorts of things, but be prepared to sort of talk through the shape of the career. And then you need to look at authorship. You need to look at the ordering of the authors on the publications. Now, have they lived their entire academic life as author 5 of 7? Now, that could be significant. It is important to ask the question. You need to see if at any point they've started a project on their own and finished it on their own. And by the way, this is why I'm so agitated about the PhD by publication, because normally you'd expect a PhD, people have written it on their own so you can go and read their doctorate. But if they've been part of what I call the stapled doctorate, so they've got a few publications, slam them together and staple them, you can't even check at the doctoral level if they can actually write, because that's what you're trying to do. Find a singly authored paper, read it, and check out the supervisor's writing style. But you're also reading their work and the citations to look at who they've worked with, which gives you that nice sort of family of prospective supervisors as well. And that's good. That's really good. So doing this type of search not only introduces the supervisor, but also topics and people who are working on those topics. So that's tremendous, and it's intellectually generous. Great. You're also checking the prospective supervisor's qualifications. This is important for many reasons. For example, do they have a teaching qualification? Do they have an educational qualification? That matters, because if they don't know how to teach, how can they teach you? And the great gift of someone who has an interest in education, whatever discipline you're working in, is that they can write SOS, Scholarship of Supervision, and SOTL, Scholarship of Teaching and Learning papers with you, which adds another very interesting publication arm to your CV. Then you need to go to Twitter X, go to Instagram, go to Facebook, go to Blue Sky, whatever you want to go to, have a look. And what I want you to do is just read their feed. Just read the feed, and what you're checking for is bullying, abuse, racial vilification. Are they spending some hours every day being angry with somebody on the internet? Just check. And then do a raw Google search. Look for the first 100 returns. Is there anything weird or odd? Now, from all of this unobtrusive research, that's where you're asking questions. If there's anything that is worrying you, ask those questions. So we're in the conversation and we're exploring motivations, expectations, and assumptions. So we've done the P, the people. Let's move to my next P, project. Now, this project will vary quite radically by discipline. So in many areas of the applied and fundamental sciences, you are coming into an already existing project, an already funded project, right? And so therefore, what's being assessed at that point is your skill set. Can you contribute to this project? Have you got the scientific skills, the equipment-based science skills to contribute to this project? Now, please don't spruik your ability. Don't talk about the equipment you've used. If you haven't used it, you're going to be found out. That's not a great way to start a relationship. And just because you can't use a piece of equipment in the past, you haven't used it, doesn't mean you can't learn. Express willingness to learn. Now, in other disciplines, students come to the gig with an already existing project. It may be a vibe, it may be maybe a 30-page research project. It might be, this is what I'm doing. And so you're coming with a project. And in this case, the supervisor has a very careful role to explore the scaffolding literature with you, methodological concerns or advantages, and also a good supervisor right at the start is able to pick out what is great about the project, what's great, express enthusiasm, and the perspective and the possible problems as well. Okay, so what we're doing at this point is assessing if the project is viable. Has it got the scope and scale for a doctorate? Is it a master's, for example? Does it have a SOC? What could the SOC be? Now, obviously nothing's nailed down at this point. You haven't done the project. But what we're trying to do, the goal here is to see if one human, a student, another human, a supervisor, can mesh together and create this project. Is the project viable? That's what I'm assessing. Is it viable? Now, can I say is also great, I think, for students to ask what the supervisor's currently working on, their projects as well. And most supervisors would be thrilled by that and will tell you and be terribly excited about their project as well. So the three other variables that you've got to watch for when we're doing this interview about the project, we're looking for resourcing, timelines, and the context in which this project will take place. So make sure there is an overt discussion of the funding that is available or increasing these days not available. Don't go in, please don't go in thinking that the university is going to fund you $8,000 or $10,000 to go to an international conference. That money is just not available. Okay, so be honest and clear in terms of what funding is available. The crucial other decision is, of course, timelines to completion. Does this university have milestones in place? Do they care about completion times? And the context for the project involves really important stuff that you don't think is important about the library, the librarians, the library services, IT support, professional development programs. Ask these questions. Now, we've done the two P's, people and project, that's great. We're now on to the R, the relationship. Now, too often, and I get really cross about this, so I've just got to take a breath, calm the farm terror. Too often when we discuss the relationship, a dreadful word is used, and that word is fit. Fit. Now, I despise this word because it suggests that the student should simply fit in with the already existing culture and student and supervisor. And can I say the word fit is also used increasingly in a lot of job applications as well. So, we're looking for fit. Really problematic for many reasons. For me, fit is code, that they want someone to basically lose themselves in a workplace or university culture, and none of their differences, none of their diversity actually matters. And particularly when you hear students needing to fit into a lab, I always get a bit concerned as someone who's had to investigate toxic lab cultures. Often there's a very tight in-group and a lot of pretty bad behaviour around that group. So be conscious of the word fit. You shouldn't have to change everything you are to fit into this culture. Really, the word we need to be using is mesh. Are we able to mesh, come together and do good work? All of this conversation is about whether these two humans can work together. Now, many universities wonderfully have a list of rights and responsibilities for the student and also for the supervisor advisor. And sometimes this is called a supervisory charter. I've written 2 of these, one for Flinders, one for CDU, and I've linked to them. They're public documents, linked to them at the end of this post. So they're great. You can print them out. They're about a page and a half, and you've basically got a checklist of what you're looking for and the questions you need to ask. But there are also particular proxies you're looking for, and this is crucial here. So when we're thinking about the relationship, what are the proxies for whether or not this is going to work? Number 1, discuss authorship expectations. Get the prospective supervisor to talk about their expectations of authorship and publishing, and also their expectations about writing, drafting, and editing. Do they know what they're doing? Use and explore those expectations about authorship. It's very important for students to do this. And for our crew in Australia, we have the great gift of the Australian Code for the responsible conduct of research. But I've seen so many relationships break down when that question's asked. So the student comes to the conversation and says, right, well, I'm wanting to write a scholarly monograph. I want to use this thesis to write a book. And of course, the supervisor is only interested in the articles that they can write with the student, and they can't get authorship on a book and it doesn't interest them. They want as many articles as possible, so the relationship falls apart at that point. So ask your supervisor about the code if you're in the Australian system. For our colleagues around the world, almost all universities have an authorship code. Dig it out, look at it, and ask questions about it. Your career's on the line here. You need to get this information. Now, another proxy about whether or not this is going to work is meeting frequency. And this is important, and we'll return to this at the end of the post in a second. But how often does this supervisor advisor meet with his, her, or their students? How often? Why that matters is quick completions occur through weekly meetings. Full stop. If you meet weekly, you're going to finish quickly. If you don't meet weekly, hello, thanks for playing. So discuss meeting frequency. And also discuss, another proxy is how you will communicate with your supervisor. So unless you're in a lab with some challenging OCI health and safety concerns, there is no reason, no reason for your supervisor to have your mobile phone number. You are not a drug dealer. You are not a sex worker. So speak overtly. Do you want to be contacted outside of the working day? Yes or no? Do you want to be contacted on the weekend? Yes or no? To be frank, the answer to all of that should be no, but it is your choice. Then also discuss the use of social media. What are you comfortable with? LinkedIn okay? Facebook not okay? Be clear on that. And also email etiquette rules. Discuss communication systems. And then we move to professional development for both the student and the supervisor. So the student has to speak of their professional goals: skill development, career development, publishing goals. But also the supervisor should speak about their ongoing professional development. How are they every day improving as a supervisor? What PD are they doing? Now, these are all incredibly important questions. And we finish with the crucial one, the capacity to finish the thesis on time. Ask your prospective supervisor the percentage of their students that finish in the minimum time, whether your system is 3, 4, 5, or 6 years. How many finish quickly? What percentage of their students are trit? Now, remember what I've said, colleagues, for 10 years to you. Anyone can supervise a PhD. The beginning of the process is incredibly pleasant. Right? You get to have a cup of coffee with a really bright person discussing ideas. It's a really nice thing. But it is very, 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 very difficult to finish a PhD. It is very difficult to supervise a student to completion. In fact, you've heard me say for the last 10 years, to be honest with you, when we discuss PhD supervision, the capacity to supervise and the capacity to supervise to completion are actually two different skill sets. So if your supervisor is interested in students as free or cheap labour to enable their own publication train, then you need to find that out nice and early, because it's in their interests to have you remaining in enrolment. And I've seen even wonderful young men in the experimental sciences whose theses blow out to 8 or 9 years. Why? Because the supervisor didn't want them to finish, because they wanted the publications. Okay? Yeah. So we need to commence this conversation. We need to begin with the end in mind. And really strange things happen at the end of PhDs. And you notice how rarely people talk about this? So let me give you some horror examples so you have them in your mind when you're going into this conversation. So let me give you one example. One, a supervisor notoriously did not see his students and basically left them to their own devices. Bye, I'll see you in 4 years, right? And one of those students got a really, really tough examination result, had no support at all really, and the poor student got 2 Ds. That is, in my system, a revise and resubmit. So that means they've got to do a huge amount of work and they then have to go through examination again. So a couple of Ds, terrible result really. And this gentleman, the supervisor, the morning after that result came through, contacted me, and I'll give you the exact phrase he used, quote, "It's a better use of your time to work with the student. It's not a great use of my time." So just to clarify, I wasn't the supervisor for this student at all. I was a dean, professor with my own students and so forth at the time. And I had no connection with the student at all. I'd never met this poor student. So be aware there are supervisors that just don't care very much and also don't have the skill set to get a student to completion. I'll give you one more example. This is horrific. So a student was enrolled for a really, really, really long time. Posh university. 3 supervisors, none of whom wanted to see this student at all. She would try and see one of them once a month. And I was contacted to be added to the supervisory panel in a, and I'm going to use the quote, in a quote, informal capacity, end of quote, to meet with the student and read their work. I have no connection with that university at all. I don't know the supervisors. I don't know the student. Okay. One other student, again enrolled in a posh university, had a dreadful relationship with her supervisor and had weekly meetings with Steve and I. We were working at a completely different university. And with our work, we read the drafts, she finished, did incredibly well, and the university and the supervisor got credit for that completion, and our work was completely invisible. It still is. Now, a great friend of mine, Lauren used the best description I've ever heard of this behaviour, and I'm speaking the words because, Lauren, I'm going to be quoting you, as you know, in the Closterpolitan University book. I think this is actually going to be a chapter title. That's how important Lauren's description was. And she described all of these practices as, quote, outsourcing PhD supervision, end of quote. How brilliant is that? Outsourcing PhD supervision. So a supervisor requiring an editor to be hired, taxpayers' money, an editor to be hired because they're not prepared to do the work for the student and or teach the student how to edit their own work, which seems pretty important to me, but also suddenly using PhD coaches to work with the student because the supervisors are not prepared to see the student on a regular basis. So the coach has to come in and do the work. And then, of course, and must calm the farm, universities outsourcing professional development to these dreadful corporate consultants. Oh, I just feel a bit sick. And these corporate, these tech bros come in and, explain exactly what's wrong with our universities and higher education. And haven't the tech bros done so well on the planet for us all at the moment? So the idea that we who work in universities, how we work is not great. You need to be more agile and disruption. And that's how you get on. Disgusting. Now, I'm speaking about this to finish off the post this week out of personal experience. Something strange is happening at the moment, and I don't actually know what it is, but I'll just give you the data and you can decide what all of this means. So I've had 10 incidents in the last year where supervisors have not seen their students, they haven't read their written work, and the student is way overdue, right? And all of a sudden, the supervisors, or indeed the universities, are contacting me to finish off these students. Now, I don't work for these institutions, I don't know the student, I don't know these people. What is going on? But they need somebody to meet on a weekly basis with the students, read their work and finish them. What's going on? Now, I do have some answers to that question. Certainly laziness from supervisors, a lack of collegiality, so a desire to just, I can't be bothered, so I'll throw a colleague under the bus so they can finish the student off. But also you see poor decisions from students. Students haven't had this robust interview situation where they've really probed what this relationship is going to be like. So they didn't select the correct supervisor. And so someone else has to take 100 hours, 1,000 hours, 2,000 hours out of their life to try and get this student through. So please remember, right at the beginning, talk about the ending. Talk about how will you finish, how quickly will you finish, when will they meet with you, when will they read your written work. Ask these questions, write down these answers. Now, both the student and the supervisor should speak of their expectations about progress, but also about the ending. Talk about the expectations from the first 6 months and the last 6 months. Talk about support. What have the supervisors done when a student has struggled? Now, put all of these answers in that follow-up email, do a send receive on it, and get it agreed. And just to finish this post with some old goth negativity, I just want to quickly go through Atlas Sage. What a great name, Atlas Sage. Why had I Atlas Sage? Atlas Sage's guide to how to choose a supervisor. And using the language of the young people, there were a list of red flags, and I agree with these. So, what are red flags going into the situation? Lack of meetings, lack of feedback, discrimination on the basis of a sociological characteristic, making students feel like a burden, manipulating students through a lack or availability of funding, exploitation of students as cheap labour, dishonest behaviour, and no understanding of the doctoral process. They're the red flags. The green flags, some good proxies here. A presentation of the human side of supervision, availability and communication, expertise in research design, compatibility in working styles, incredibly important, respect for personal and professional boundaries, hell yeah for me, upholding research and academic integrity, and career support and development. Great stuff. They're the green flags. Now, those checklists are available to frame and for you to use in this guide, in this interview. Please remember, this is important, please remember the power of a student. A higher degree student these days, they're rare. Every university on planet Earth wants you, okay? And for supervisors watching my post today, remember that students have choices. Don't assume that these students are like us, like we were 10, 20, 30 years ago. They're not. We were sort of desperate, but and so appreciative that a university and a supervisor would even notice us, right? That was a toxic relationship. They were bad situations, and our students now are much more aware, much more centred, have the doctoral studies, research literature, and the scholarship of supervision literature. They know what's going on. Now, I welcome these differences. because through this remarkable generation of students, we will transform what is expected in doctoral education. I wish you love, light and peace. Tea out.